The first time I noticed something wrong with my backyard was a little after midnight when the motion light turned on, even though nothing was there. And I only remember the exact time because I had been lying awake, scrolling through videos, and the sudden light pouring through the window made me think someone had stepped into the yard, so I pulled the curtain back, expecting to see a raccoon or maybe the neighbor's cat. But the grass was empty and the fence line was still, and the light eventually shut off by itself. And that should have been the end of it, except the next night it happened again at almost the exact same time, and the night after that too. And after a week of it, I started staying awake on purpose, waiting for the light to turn on, and every time it did, the yard looked completely normal, which somehow made it worse because it meant something was triggering the sensor without leaving anything behind. And after about 2 weeks, I started to notice a pattern. The light only turned on when I was looking away, and I didn't realize that at first. But one night I sat there staring directly at the yard for almost 30 minutes, and nothing happened. And the moment I checked my phone, the window flashed bright again, like something had just stepped into the yard the second I looked down. And I remember laughing a little because it felt like some dumb coincidence. But the next night I tested it again, and the same thing happened. The light stayed off as long as I watched the yard, and the second my eyes left the window, it switched on again, like it was reacting to me. And that was when I started feeling uncomfortable about the backyard at night, because it meant whatever was out there seemed to know when I wasn't looking, and I didn't tell anyone about it because it sounded ridiculous, and honestly, the yard looked completely normal. During the day, nothing weird, no broken fence, no tracks, no signs that anyone had even been near the place. But about 3 weeks into this, something new happened that made it harder to ignore because the light turned on while I was staring straight at it, and when it did, I saw the swing move slightly, even though there was no wind. And the swing set in my yard was old. It had been there since before we moved in. Just a simple metal frame with 2 seats hanging by chains, and normally it never moved unless someone pushed it. But that night it rocked slowly, like someone had just stepped off it. And I remember telling myself it was probably the temperature changing, or maybe a small gust of air that I couldn't feel from inside the house, but the motion stopped the second the light turned off. And the next night, when the light came on again, the swing was moving again too, but this time it wasn't just a little sway, it was a slow, steady movement back and forth, like someone was sitting on it, gently rocking. And that was when I noticed the first rule, even though I didn't call it that at the time. The swing only moved when the light was on, and the light only turned on when I wasn't paying attention, and that weird pattern kept repeating every night for almost a month, until I finally decided to go outside and check the yard myself, because part of me was tired of feeling nervous about something that probably had a normal explanation. So one night when the light turned on, I walked out through the back door, and the moment I stepped into the yard, the light shut off, and the swing stopped moving instantly, like someone had frozen in place. The second I came outside, and I stood there for a while, just listening, because backyards at night are usually full of small sounds. Insects, leaves, the distant noise of traffic. But that night, everything was strangely quiet. And when I looked at the swing, it hung perfectly still, like it hadn't moved at all, which should have made me feel better. But instead, it felt like I had interrupted something, and whatever it was had just stepped away for a moment. And after that night, the second strange thing started happening, which was the footprints. And I didn't notice them at first because they weren't always there, but every few mornings I'd wake up and see a single footprint pressed into the dirt near the swing set. Just one, not a trail, just one print, like someone had stepped there and then disappeared. And the weirdest part was the position, because the print always faced the house, like whoever left it had been standing there looking directly at my window. And the first time I saw it, I assumed maybe one of the neighbor's kids had jumped the fence. But the fence was high, and there were never any other tracks leading in or out. Just that one footprint. And the next morning it was gone. Like the ground had somehow reset itself overnight, and after a while another rule became obvious. The footprint only appeared on nights when the lights stayed on longer than usual, and those nights were getting more frequent, and I started sleeping with the curtain closed because I didn't like the idea that something might be standing in the yard facing my window, but closing the curtain only made the situation worse, because once I stopped watching the yard, the lights started turning on earlier, sometimes before midnight, sometimes even while the sun was barely down. And one night when it happened earlier than usual, I heard something else for the first time, which was the faint creaking of the swing chains moving outside, and that sound carried through the open window in a slow rhythm, like someone gently rocking back and forth. And I remember sitting up in bed realizing that the light hadn't turned on yet, even though the swing was clearly moving, which broke the pattern that had been happening for weeks. And when I finally pulled the curtain open, the light flashed on instantly, like it had been waiting for me to look. And the swing stopped in the same moment. And that was when I noticed something else in the yard that hadn't been there before, which was the old plastic chair from our patio sitting directly under the swing set, facing my window. And I knew for a fact the chair hadn't been there earlier that day, because we kept those stacked beside the house, and I had walked past them when I got home from work, but somehow one of them had moved into the middle of the yard, and it was positioned perfectly so that if someone sat in it, they would be staring directly at my bedroom window. And the next morning when I went outside, the chair was back where it belonged, like it had never moved. And I started checking the yard every night after that, and every few nights something would be slightly different. Sometimes the chair would be under the swing again. Sometimes the gate on the fence would be open, even though I always locked it. And sometimes the swing would already be moving before the light came on, like something was already out there before the sensor noticed it. And over time, another strange rule appeared, which was that nothing in the yard ever changed while I was watching it. Everything only shifted the moment I looked away. And I tested that more than once, sitting by the window for long stretches, staring into the yard until my eyes watered and nothing ever happened. Until the exact moment my attention slipped. And eventually the night started feeling longer because I found myself waiting for the light to turn on just to see what new thing would be different. And one night the difference was something I still can't explain, because when the light switched on, the swing was moving again, but the plastic chair wasn't under it anymore. It was right below my window facing the house. And I hadn't heard anything move across the grass, and there were no tracks in the dirt. But the chair had somehow traveled from the center of the yard to the wall of the house. And when I leaned closer to the glass to look at it, I noticed the dirt beneath the chair had a single footprint pressed into it, pointing toward my window, exactly like the ones that sometimes appeared by the swing. And that was when I realized something that made my stomach drop, because the footprint wasn't out by the swing anymore. It was right below where I was standing. And that meant whatever had been leaving them had slowly been moving closer to the house over time. And after that night, the light didn't wait until midnight anymore. Sometimes it turned on minutes after sunset, and sometimes it turned on multiple times in the same night. And every time I looked outside, something in the yard had changed position just slightly. The swing a little farther forward, the chair a little closer to the house, the footprint a little nearer to the window, and I started sleeping in another room after that because I didn't like the idea that something might be standing right below where I used to sleep. And for a while, that seemed to stop the pattern because the light turned on less often and the yard looked normal again. And I almost convinced myself the whole thing had just been my imagination reacting to small coincidences. But about a week later, I woke up to the sound of the swing creaking again, and the first thing I noticed was that the motion light hadn't turned on this time, which meant whatever was moving out there wasn't triggering the sensor anymore. And when I walked quietly to the window and pulled the curtain back, the yard was dark, but I could still see the swing faintly in the moonlight, slowly rocking back and forth, and beneath it, the plastic chair was empty, facing the house, exactly where it had been before. And I remember standing there watching for a long time, waiting for the light to come on, like it always used to, but it never did. And eventually, the swing stopped moving, and the yard went completely still again. And the next morning when I checked outside, there were no footprints anywhere in the dirt. But the plastic chair was still sitting directly under my window. And when I turned it around to carry it back to the patio, I noticed something carved faintly into the back of it that hadn't been there before, just 3 words scratched into the plastic so lightly I almost missed them. And they simply said, "You looked away, and even now the motion light still turns on, sometimes late at night. And every once in a while when I wake up and check the yard, the swing is already moving even though the light hasn't turned on yet, and the chair is always somewhere different, in the grass facing the house, like someone has been sitting there waiting for the moment I stop watching."